This video is going to talk about integers and graphing. And there's a couple keywords that you're going to have to know to get through this. The first keyword is integer. And what an integer is all of the positive whole numbers, their opposites, and 0. So you already know what 0 is. And you already know what a positive whole number is. 1, 2, 3. What you can do with 1, 2, and 3 is you can choose to put a positive sign in front of each one of those, and that makes it positive 1, positive 2, positive 3. Typically, if you don't put the positive sign in front of the number, we assume that it is positive. But if you choose to still put that positive sign so you're absolutely sure that everyone knows what you're talking about, that is normally a very good thing to do when we're working with positive and negative numbers. So we know what positive whole numbers are. Not 1.5, not 2.33, just the whole numbers. 1, 2, 3, and don't forget 0. 0 is also an integer. What we also need to talk about is their opposite. So if I give you one apple, then you have one apple. If I do the opposite of giving you an apple, if I take it away, that means I'm subtracting one apple away from you. You'll have one less apple, which would be -1. And you can tell that 1 and -1 are the same distance away from 0 on this number line. They're both one hop away. The opposite of 2, or the opposite of positive 2, is going to be -2. So if 2 is 2 spots away on the number line, its opposite, -2, is going to be the same distance away, but 2 hops. And we're going to show that it goes the other direction by putting a -2. -3, same thing. The opposite of 3 is going to be -3. You might have caught that I just said that right there. That's okay, we'll move on. So, what we're going to look at first is we're going to look at graphing some of these numbers onto a number line when they don't provide you with a number line. So if we have 12 feet below sea level, what you're going to want to do to that is you're going to think about, if I'm going 12 feet below sea level, so sea level is like right here and I'm going 12 feet below, that's going to be going in a negative direction. That's going to be going down, which is negative. So you're going to put -12 on your number line. And you're going to put it right in the middle. And you're going to put one spot above and one spot below. Because what you want to do is you want to show where it sits on the number line. And there's no sense in drawing out a big long number line to graph one number. That just doesn't make sense. So what I want to show now is what happens if I go up 1. What happens if I get 1 in the positive direction? Well, what's actually going to happen is this -12 will become -11. Because then it'll be -10, -9, -8, all the way until 0, and then start getting bigger with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what would go down here? Well, that would be -13. We can also graph that. We can graph it on an up and down or a side to side. Either one of these work, and I know that you've gotten some experience with these as we've been looking at graphing things, so this shouldn't be too challenging. So if we put -12 here, if I get bigger, if I go in the positive direction, the positive direction would make this -11 because I'm getting closer to the positives. If I go over here, that would be -13 because I'm getting more in the negative direction. I like to think about this as the direction that I read. So you always start off here and you read going from right to left. And because you start at the right and you go to the left, your numbers are getting bigger. The more words you read, that number gets bigger. So you always think about smaller on this side, larger on this side. Let's take a look at earning 3 tickets. If I earn 3 tickets, I'm going to put a 3 on my number line. And then what happens if I get more towards the positive? Well, 1 more than 3 is 4. 1 less than 3 is 2. Same thing going on the up and down one. 3 goes here. If I get 1 more, that's 4. If I get 1 less, that's 2. Which you can almost see with the glare. That's okay. All right, the last one over here, stock price is dropping $2. Well, if stock prices drop $2, that means that they go in a negative direction because the price is getting smaller. Because if it drops by $2, you'd have to subtract. So I'm going to put a -2 here. If the stock prices get bigger, that'll actually mean it will be -1 because it will be closer to the positive. If it gets smaller, that would be -3 because remember that negatives are the opposite. So the opposite of getting bigger, when you get bigger in the positives, the number gets bigger. The opposite of that is smaller. Same thing over here. I'm going to put -2. And if the number gets bigger, if it goes higher, if that stock price gets higher, it'll be at -1. And if it goes lower, it will be at -3. All right, let's take a look at graphing a bunch of numbers at once. And if you graph a bunch of numbers at once, what it's important to remember, because you don't know how long to make your number line at first, is to identify the largest and the smallest number of the group. So if I'm graphing 3, -5, and 1, the first thing I need to do is I need to find my largest number. That's going to be the biggest number without a negative sign on it. So 3, -5, 3 is going to be bigger than -5 because 3 is a positive number. And if it helps me, I can put a positive sign right there. And then I also have 1, which is again a positive. You don't have to put that positive sign, but you can. And I know that my largest number is 3. My smallest number is going to be the biggest number with a negative sign. It's going to be the biggest opposite number. So there's only one number with a negative sign, so it's going to be -5. So I know that my number line is going to start at 3, and it's going to go all the way down to -5 because that's my largest and my smallest number. So I'm actually going to start by putting the largest number on there. And then I'm going to get smaller and smaller until I get to -5. So 3, 1 smaller is 2, then 1, then 0. And what's 1 less than 0? That's going to be -1, -2, -3. And you see as I keep getting smaller, my numbers are actually getting bigger. That's because in the opposites, the smaller you get, the bigger you get. It's kind of like if you owe me money, right? And you're going to hear me say this a lot because it's something that really catches with a lot of kids. If you owe me $3 and then you end up owing me $2 more for whatever reason, instead of owing me $3, which would be -3, now we add on that -2. Now you owe me -5, and the amount that you owe me gets bigger. Even though you have less money, the amount that you need to give me gets bigger. I get really rich when I use those examples. So, -1, -2, -3, -4, -5. And you can see that now I'm going to graph these numbers up here. So +3 goes right there in my graph. -5 goes right here. +1 goes right here. And actually, what I just remembered I forgot to do all over here was to actually put the dot on the number that we were graphing. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. So 12 feet below sea level, -12, -12. I'm not redoing the entire video because I forgot to do dots. Earning 3 tickets, that's $3, or 3 and 3. It doesn't have to be dollars. Dollars just help you remember positive, negative. Orange marker. And then stock price is dropping $2 is -2, -2. There we go. We've got all our fancy dots on there now. It's actually very important to do. Don't forget to do that. And then we have our last example, which is -2, 1, 0, and -4. So first, I need to find my largest number. My largest number out of here is the biggest number that doesn't have a negative sign. And that's actually going to end up being 1. Out of -2, 1, 0, and -4, my biggest number is going to be 1. My smallest number is going to be the biggest number with a negative sign, which is going to be -4. So I'm going to start with my largest number, which is 1. And then I'm going to graph back until I get to -4. So 1 less than 1 is 0, less than that is negative 1, less than that is negative 2, negative 3, negative 4. And now I need to graph all of these numbers. So I need to graph negative 2, which is right here. I need to graph 1, which is all the way up here, 0, which is right here, and negative 4, which is right here. All right, so now I'm going to give you your work that you're going to do. One of these I actually have thought out, the other one I'm going to think out on the fly. So the first thing that you're going to do is I'm going to give you a group of numbers, and you are going to tell me the largest and the smallest out of those numbers so that we can you can plan to start making that number line. You don't have to make the number line. That's going to be really difficult to explain in the form. I get that. But you're going to tell me what's the largest and the smallest out of them. So if I have negative 15, 7, 3, and negative 22, you're going to tell me what the largest and the smallest is out of that. You're also going to tell me if these things are going to be positive integers or negative integers. So, for example, if I tell you there's a 10-yard loss in football, is that a positive or a negative number? If I tell you that there are 4 inches of rain above normal this year, is that going to be positive or negative? If I tell you there's a $48 deposit for your bank account, is that a positive or a negative? If I tell you that it's 10 degrees below zero, is that a positive or a negative? And if I tell you that the elevator is going 7 feet into the basement, is that a positive or a negative?